Hello, my name is Paul Lanzillotti. I'm today's presenter. I'm also the founder of the MBA admissions consulting firm, the Amerasia Consulting Group. Today, we are going to go over writing a quote-unquote perfect Wharton application. Firm, the Amerasia Consulting Group.
Paul,
Pragmatic.
Paul, sorry to interrupt, but can you please close YouTube?
Writing a quote-unquote perfect.
Is YouTube playing in background?
I'm not sure. One second.
Do you have any YouTube window open on your browser? I was getting echo. Okay, can you share your screen now?
Yep, sharing.
Okay, this is live. You can continue speaking.
Sure.
Thanks.
Sorry about that, snafu, folks. So today we're going to, in all pragmatic terms, today we're going to focus on Wharton's two main essays. I was actually going to include a bit on letters of recommendation, the individual online application questions, and creating the perfect resume, but I'm going to push that into next week's presentation. So that's something to look forward to. So today we'll cover the two main questions here. Something to note is that these are the questions from the 2020-2021 application cycle. Wharton has not yet, as of this morning, released new updated super duper essay questions. So I imagine they'll probably be a lot like what you see here. So what you see here will be relevant. More on that later. All right, so how do I know what I'm talking about? How does Paul know what he's talking about? Well, a little bit on me. I've been doing this admissions consulting primarily for MBA since 2017. I've probably worked with well over 600 candidates to B school and other professional programs. Former life, I used to work at Veritas, manage all their operations, which included admissions consultants and instructors. I used to teach at Kaplan way back in the day. Also, I was a former instructor for the Wharton MBA track. And of course, I graduated from UCLA Anderson, and I've interviewed more students or more applicants as a student and alumni interviewer than I can remember. Anyway, what's the bottom line here? Why is this so relevant? Because I've seen pretty much every different type of client scenario or conundrum. And my advice and how I structure the following about both the Wharton essays is based on that experience. I try to be as pragmatic and specific as possible, right? Anyway, before we jump into the essays, if you haven't already, view my presentation from last week where I covered what you need to know about Wharton, how you would research the school, its clubs, all the bells and whistles that the program has to offer. And comparatively speaking, with other top MBA programs, it has a lot of nuances, majors, pretty much every imaginable elective that you would want to take. Next week, June 3rd, we're going to primarily cover the team-based discussion, which is the fun 6 people in a room, in a boiler room interview, and how to facilitate it, how to present your 1-minute pitch, and of course, some actual one-on-one interview questions. That's the last part of the Wharton interview. And of course, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're also going to cover a bit of the LORs, the resume, the online Wharton app questions that we didn't get to this week. All right. Essay 1. And this has pretty much been Wharton's Essay 1 for a long time. What do you hope to gain professionally from the Wharton MBA? 500 words. So I would say maybe 4 years ago, they changed it to exactly this wording, and it's remained the same ever since. Before, they used to say, Wharton used to ask, what do you hope to gain personally and professionally from the Wharton MBA? I think the personally part confused a lot of people, so they canned that aspect of it. But make no mistake about it, folks, this is the goals essay, much like you would see it CBS, Columbia Business School, or Booth. This is a very traditional goals essay, to be honest with you. Okay, so when you see something like this, beyond recognizing that it is Wharton's goals essay and you need to state your goals, right? The first thing I would like you to think as the applicant, as the writer, is holy moly, I need to answer this question as directly as possible, at a high level, of course, in the beginning of this essay, right? Thus, for all intents and purposes, my long-term goal should be front and center. What I want you to visualize right now, and maybe I should draw up a nice little graphic here for next time, but I want you to think of a funnel, right? At the top of that funnel, things are very, it's obviously the widest part of the funnel, right? And think of that as the beginning of your essay. And that's your long-term goal, your long-term vision, what you want to achieve, when all is said and done, what you want them to write on your tombstone, basically. And then as you drill down and through this essay, your short-term goals would come next. And that's when the funnel starts to narrow. And then you get into kind of a transition, what have I already done paragraph. And then you get into the why Wharton paragraphs. So you see you get more and more granular as you go down the funnel, right? Hopefully you have the funnel right side up. Anyway, so before I get into the next part of the slide, there are, listen, when a school asks you, any school, when they ask you almost any essay question, they want you to be as direct as possible. Why I'm, giving you a little sidebar here is because this is going to be one of the most annoying habits that a writer can have, not just for little old me, Paul, but for the admissions committee. If they can't determine what the hell you're talking about in terms of what you hope to gain or what your goals are in the very beginning of the essay, if they can understand what your main point is, your thesis, right, then it really becomes onerous. So for the reader, and imagine reading thousands of these things, half of them probably bad, and it's 1 a.m. and they have to make these decisions as the Wharton admissions committee. It really does bother them more than one might think. So don't make this a murder mystery where it's revealed in the last scene or the last paragraph of the essay that the butler did it, or my short-term goal is to do whatever. Always state it up front. When you write, when you write your essays, it's not to entertain, never. It's to inform. And the overall purpose of writing is to be clear, is to tell them what they want to know first, and then you can explain. And when I say first, you don't dump the kitchen sink into it. You give it to them at a high level. That's why I said a high level. So answer the question that they want high level. That being said, in this essay, what I see a lot of the time, and what I like, and maybe next time I'll include it on this slide here as I pontificate, but when Wharton asks you what you hope to gain professionally from their MBA, you can, in one sentence in the very beginning, as its own paragraph. Generally, you want to avoid one sentence paragraphs, but here might be okay. I hope to gain, you would say something in the beginning like, I hope to gain, but answering the question directly, as Paul says, you would write something like, I hope to gain the personal and professional network, or I hope to gain the management, leadership, and professional network I require to reach my aspirations or my goals, period. That could be its own introductory paragraph, sentence. And then in the next paragraph, you would jump right into your long-term goal. And again, think of the funnel. Give them the long-term, after you answered the question, give them a clear long-term, more aspirational path. And here is an example, right? And be clear with your thesis here. In other words, be clear with what your long-term goal is. In the long term, my goal is to lead a specialized growth equity firm that pioneers new approaches to identifying, investing, scaling tech businesses while building a firm culture of yada, 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 right? So that is your aspirational long-term goal. Well, maybe not yours, but this is how you would write it. It would be approximately this detailed with respect to just defining what it is in a sentence, what your long-term goal is in one sentence. Now be careful, because you can run into run-on sentence territory, but that's a whole other grammar presentation that maybe I'll do in the future. Anyway, it would look something as sufficiently specific or vague as this, right? Now, after you tell them what on earth you want to do in the long term, then and only then, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, can you tell them your justification. So here's the justification. I personally believe a key differentiator for growth equity firms is blah, 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 right? Now you see most of the justification here is based on this dummy applicant's professional experience. And that's completely okay. Because the one thing I want you to know about schools like Booth and in particular Wharton and especially CBS is that these schools are business schools. Well, they're all business schools. So I suppose here at the bottom, you could get into, I grew up in a poor rural village in the most upper part of Rajasthan, or wherever, right? Or upstate New York. And some of those things are appropriate, but remember, you have 500 words here, and you may be robbing Paul to pay Rajiv, right? And so you want to make sure you don't put too much personal or even professional background or justification here, because again, it is a goals essay and this is a business school, and they're not as concerned about necessarily why you want to do it if it goes so far back to a village that you once grew up in Canada. A little bit of that is appropriate if it fits the long-term goal, but again, this is the part of the essay where 9 times out of 10, I have my clients cut out a lot of that stuff. The admissions committee's kind of seen it all before. It delays getting to the short-term goal, because long-term goal then short-term goal, if you think of the funnel. And it just becomes kind of a distraction in the flow of the essay and getting to the points that the reader really wants to see. Okay, anyway, let's go to this next slide. So you want to use your long-term goal to, as I was saying on the prior paragraph, the example, to differentiate, showcase your passion, tell the AdCom about your personal background, POV, right? So a little bit of that personal background. And when I say personal background, again, it can be I grew up in a village in upstate New York or wherever, but more likely because Wharton is more business and less about what matters most to you, like Stanford, or less about Harvard's tell us anything you want to that you think is relevant, essays that are about goals and perhaps leadership. This, you can have fun, you can be a little creative, you can tell them about your personal background, only if it's relevant. And just know that after you write this and you get to the end and your essay is 600 words and it can only be 500, that you may have to start cutting somewhere. And the best place to start cutting is here, because what they really care about your goals. And towards the end of the essay, when you start writing about why Wharton, that's also, in my opinion, and my opinion is based on what I've seen work, that's much more important than adding a bunch of content, of personal content in terms of your personal point of view based on what you've done at work, your personal point of view because you grew up in, the UP. So anyway, all right, just know that you can, with respect to what's another relevant point here, just know that you can reach for the stars, as they say, with your longer term goals. Now, your longer term goals, in my opinion, which is based on what I've seen work, should be shorter than your short-term goals. With schools like beyond Stanford and Harvard, your short-term goals should be paramount, because these schools are primarily focused on is can the applicant get the job that they state? Sure, they want to know that you can save the world, or you want to save the world, and they want to feel good about letting you in, and you're going to bring running water to every village in Canada, right? But really, they are fixated on your short-term goal, which we'll get to next. So don't let me jump the gun here. Anyway, just know that you can give them a little bit of your personal point of view, but not too much. You'll probably end up cutting from this long-term goal section, and whatnot. All right. The other point I have here, the second bullet point, don't worry if all of their applicants say they want to start their own business. Okay, why is that in there? I think this is also relevant perhaps to the short-term goal, but if you have some reach for the stars goal or not, and let's just say you want to start your own business and that's your long-term goal, you want to start your own investment management firm, bring, inclusive finance to every village in Canada. Just know that I have a lot of applicants or clients who tell me, I'm worried that somebody else might have this goal, or I'm worried that this doesn't distinguish me enough. You don't want to distinguish yourself through your goals. I know that sounds weird. Aren't I supposed to stand out? Just think of it this way. They, especially with your short-term goals, if you are distinguishing yourself through your goals, then that means it's probably more on towards the end of the spectrum of unique things the admissions committee has never heard about before and probably can't help you with. So don't tell them, to use an extreme example, a long-term goal that would definitely distinguish somebody, not in a good way, would be to become a rodeo clown upon graduation from, not upon in the long term. My long-term goal is to become a rodeo clown and bring the circus to every little girl and boy in Canada, right? Now, that is something that would definitely distinguish you, but is completely irrelevant, right? So with goals, be conservative. Be very, very conservative with your short-term goal, but in the long term, don't think you have to create something that just doesn't make sense, that doesn't logically follow your short-term goal, that doesn't logically follow what you're doing today, unless you're a rodeo clown or unless you work for the circus right now in the front office. Don't go crazy when you don't have to. It will paint you as somebody who is not just irrelevant to Wharton, but perhaps, excuse my French here, a little batshit crazy, right? Don't stand out like, nails that stick out get the hammer in this sense. All right. Another thing I want you to notice is what I've seen is a lot of applicants, not my clients, but I've seen this before. They would tend to invert their goals. What do I mean? So, you want to do long-term goal than short-term goal. And I'm not talking about putting short-term goal before long-term goal. That's not what inverting means here. What I mean is that I have seen bad essays where the applicant will go very exotic with their short-term goal and then just simply too conservative with their long-term goal. So their short-term goal would be as ridiculous as, upon graduation, I want to join the circus and become the only, circus clown with an MBA at the Barnum Bailey Circus, right? And revive that whole rigmarole. And then what they're going to say, and they shouldn't, is the long-term goal, I'm going to then move into the front office and eventually become president of the circus. So that's, that would be that goal right there. I know it's a little ridiculous, but that would probably be about the worst thing you could say, both in terms of the circus, becoming a clown, but also going way too exotic with a short-term goal. So, nobody's ever, the admissions committee will look at that and they'll think, boy, we've never had anybody graduate from Wharton and go on and join the circus as a clown, right? And you're sitting there after you click submit on your application thinking, oh, I really distinguished myself. I'm the only person who's going to say this. Well, you just kind of engineered your way out of a job or a seat at in the Wharton classroom, at least for the next year anyway. So anyway, another point here, as ridiculous as this may sound, but I've seen it, a lot of folks will tend to forget or neglect to define specifically what their goals are. I'll get some vague, I want to bring running water to every village in, Quebec, Canada. And then, where's the upon graduation day one? What's the goal? And that'll be completely missing. I mean, I just want to point that out. So if you're on that end of the spectrum where you haven't even defined in one sentence, upon graduation, I want to do X, Y, Z, then you're crazy, right? Or at least your application will be. So by the way, if you go back to last week, there's a little bit of this in there, but you want to make sure with respect to your short-term goal, and I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, bear with me, that your short-term goal is something that somebody who has graduated from Wharton or any other school you're applying to has done before. So go view last week's presentation, but go get on LinkedIn and make sure you can find a critical mass, I don't know, 3 people, 10 people, 30 people who have the job that you want in the future post MBA that have graduated from Wharton. Anyway. All right. Next slide. Okay, so we've written about the long-term goal in a paragraph. The next paragraph in your essay, and I always advise breaking out your long-term from your short-term goal. There's these writing rules. Every paragraph should have at least 3 or 4 or 5 sentences. Okay, yeah, fine. But here, just something I picked up over the years. You want to be as pragmatic on behalf of the admissions committee reader at Wharton. So you can have a super ginormous paragraph with your long-term goals and short-term goals and maybe even a backup goal for the short-term goal in one paragraph, but you're not really helping the reader. Always try to view your application through their eyes. So yes, grammar rules would dictate we have to have at least 3 or 4 sentences in this paragraph. Okay, whatever. In this case, break them out so that the reader at Wharton on the admissions committee can rip through your essay quickly. So sidebar here, there's generally on an admissions committee, all of them, an essay will be read 2 ways, right? Your essays will be read 2 ways. The reader will read it all the way through, top to bottom, word for word, painfully slow, depending on how well you wrote it. But they'll read through it completely all. Then the second time when they go through it and they review it, they're just going to skim for the most part, right? And so that's why it's critically important. And I don't want to go too far into this whole grammar black hole here, but the first sentence of every paragraph should be what that paragraph is going to talk about. So this is a little writing rule to check yourself. If you go through your essay when you think it's all fine and dandy and done, and the first line of every paragraph doesn't form a high-level table of contents, just don't even read the rest of the paragraph. If you read the first sentence and it doesn't form a cohesive, coherent narrative that you understand, or more importantly, the admissions committee can readily understand and digest, then go back and fix your thesis sentences. Remember, the first sentence of every paragraph is what that paragraph is going to talk about. The rest of the sentences support that main point. They provide details for the main point. And the last sentence of every paragraph drives the point home of what the main point is. So I guess you could restate what the first sentence is of that paragraph. I mean, that's kind of the idea, but it's more of, that's kind of an unsophisticated writing approach, but it's more of driving the point home. So you say, my short-term goal is to do X, Y, Z. And you say, into my short-term goal of X, Y, Z, in the second sentence of the paragraph, you're going to give some more detail. And then the last sentence would drive home like something. So, the last sentence would be like, so with my current skills and abilities, I should have, and an MBA, I should have no problem reaching my short-term goal. So it's not exactly the first sentence, but it drives the point home for the reader. Anyway, if you folks want to pick up a good and quick book for how to write, the book is called The Elements of Style. You can find it online for free. And it goes over, some of the rules are not as relevant, but it goes over a lot of these techniques, right? This book's been around for forever, right? I think at least 100 years, but it's by a guy named Shrunk. I don't know his first name. I'm not on that basis with him or her, but The Elements of Style. Anyway, all right. So let's dive. So coming back to what this slide was talking about. Okay, so this paragraph is going to be about your short-term goal, right? And just state it, first sentence, straight up, like I was saying, my short-term goal. So right here, here's an example. Upon completing my MBA from Wharton, my immediate goal is to join the operating group of a tech-focused growth equity or venture capital firm, right? Now, we can debate whether or not this is an appropriate goal for you or Wharton. I'm just using this as an example, right? So you see, first sentence of the paragraph, this dummy applicant, straight up, exactly what this paragraph is going to be about. Then there's a sentence that provides, this role would provide direct, yada, yada. Then there's a sentence that explains what, dummy applicant would be doing in that role. And again, the admissions committee knows what you're going to be doing in that role, but they need to know what you're getting into, right? So this is a little bit of, do you like me? Do I like you? It's kind of a little bit of a yes, you have to, yes, I love you, but you still have to say it type thing, right? I think that would be maybe a weird, but perhaps relevant analogy. Anyway, and then you can see here, the paragraph afterwards dives a little bit deeper into what the person's doing now. Now, here, this paragraph at TAT, I've gained an appreciation for yada, yada, yada. This paragraph is somewhat necessary. It can start serving as a transition. It demonstrates your transferable skills, right? So let's say you're working at an investment bank and you want to get into private equity or venture capital upon graduation with your MBA from Wharton. Here is where I would tell you specifically, or I would tell a client or anybody else that's listening, that you do want to perhaps, if it's not a direct path, let's say, maybe you're moving from one, project management at Bank of America and you want to go join McKinsey, something like that. You want to be able to show that you have transferable skills. So even though on paper, it may not seem like you're the perfect fit, if you start breaking down what you actually do at Bank of America and what you're going to do at McKinsey or any other, consulting firm, MBB, then this is for the benefit of the reader to show that it's actually not apples to oranges or oranges to apples. It's actually more apples to apples, right? So, I've gained this experience. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4. And, and you could even say here at the end of this paragraph, all of these skills have prepared me well for a career or for my short-term goal, right? Boom, done. Okay. So just keep this. So remember, these two things kind of work in conjunction. You can break them out like this, right? Or you can actually put them together in one paragraph. I want you to, you probably would put this together in one paragraph anyway. But the next paragraph is really where you start getting into why MBA, right? And then eventually why Wharton. But just pay attention here. So going back to the prior slide, you can see the author, Joe Applicant, dummy applicant here, is saying, okay, I have these skills already. All of them set me up well for a career in private equity or VC or whatever. And then in the next paragraph, they build. So they're saying, I have 3 out of 5 things I need, 3 out of 6 things I need, because you can't have 6 out of 6 things or 5 out of 5 things, because then why do you need the MBA, right? So you have 3 out of 6, 4 out of 6, whatever it is, 50% of what you need. The other 50% will be provided, of course, through the MBA. And that's where this paragraph starts to come in on page 7 here. So next, you go into your why MBA transition paragraph, right? And I was talking about a trap on the last slide. Do not, either in this latter half of your short-term goals paragraph or in this next why MBA transition paragraph, please, for the love of all that is holy, do not go into your work experience that much. And this is where I've seen people just go off the deep end and start basically reciting their resume. They know what's on your resume. Chances are, as long as you're not a rodeo clown pre-MBA, they know what you're doing at work. So just cool it on the amount of detail. The only reason you even state any detail is because you're trying to tell them, listen, I have 50% of what I need to know. And okay, maybe there's a few little details. And then what you and you don't go into any more details of that because they can read your resume and they don't want to see it. And also it delays getting to the why Wharton part and why MBA, why Wharton part of the essay. But here you're going to assess what you still must learn. So you say in the last paragraph, the end of the last paragraph, it's like, hey, I have 50% of what I need to know to reach my short-term goal after graduation from Wharton. And then here in this next paragraph, you're going to begin to discuss the last 50% at a high level. I hope that's clear as mud to everybody. So, and I'll give an example, right? Anyway, so the only reason, remember, the only reason why you even talk about your current work experience in this paragraph, especially this paragraph, or even at the end of the last paragraph, is because you're just trying to say, hey, Wharton Admissions Committee, I have a lot of what I need. This isn't a career change as much as one might think, if it even is one at all, right? This is especially important for people who are trying to change industries more or less. And even going from iBanking to PE, that is, it's okay, yeah, it's finance, but it is it is a change, right? And it's one you want to show isn't as drastic as the admissions committee might initially think, right? Anyway, you're trying to sell yourself a little here. So I have half, I still need the other half, right? And this is another paragraph beyond the one that I told you about earlier with your personal background or perspective or point of view in the long term, when you're defining your long-term goals at the beginning of the essay. That paragraph you may have to cut out a lot at the end. And this paragraph here is another prime candidate for cutting down on the level of detail, right? Okay. Next. So here's an example of what I mean by a good YMBA transition paragraph, right? My experience sourcing, evaluating, and executing deals have helped me understand what attributes make a company good or bad. However, there are still functional areas in which I need greater expertise, right? And only then will I be able to understand what makes a okay company, determine what's a good investment, basically, right? And replicate those results in the future. So to become a more well-rounded investor and business operator, I must further develop my skills in technology development, 1, operations, 2, and management, 3. That is what I hope to gain through the Wharton MBA. So see how that last sentence is this or that is what I hope to gain through the Wharton MBA and its comprehensive management major. So you see how that drives home the point of what you're getting out of Wharton. Why? So think of it this way. Here's my so where are we? Here's my long-term goal. Boom. Then comes a short-term goal. Okay. Then comes a little bit of a transition, right? And that's what this is here. So you're saying I have a lot of the skills that I need already. However, to realize my goals, which I've already stated, I will need greater expertise in 3 areas, or you could say 4 areas or 5, but normally it's 3 or 4, right? First is, as an example, technology development, operations management. You want to spell it out at a high level here in this part of the essay, this, transition into why Wharton. So this is the why MBA transition paragraph. The next will pretty much be Wharton. Now, you'll see here I highlighted in orange management major. Just calling it out, Wharton requires that you define or you determine or you select a major before you get there. That's covered in last week's presentation, which is on YouTube in the GMAT Club channel. Anyway, so and then another little grammar note down at the bottom here. Listen, I'm underlining text, bolding text, italicizing text, things like that. What it comes down to here is don't do that on the essay. I mean, you can italicize, sure. Underlining, bolding, don't. Okay, I'm just here to emphasize for this presentation. Just wanted to make that clear. Sorry if that was remedial. Anyway, next paragraph. Now you shall move into your why Wharton paragraph. So here is where you get specific. You're going to address management and leadership skills you still require at Wharton, right? So remember how we stated those 3 areas. What was it? Let's go back. Technology development, operations, and management. Now, in the next paragraph, when you start talking specifics about Wharton, you're going to start off, and again, I don't want to sound formulaic here, but to me, this flow makes sense. So when I advocate here, so you called out 3 or 4 general areas that you need to develop. Here is where you would dive into the Wharton curriculum because you've done your research, because you viewed last week's presentation, and you would state 3 elective courses or classes that you would need in order to satisfy. Now, obviously, these 3 or 4 classes that you're stating don't cover everything you need to learn, right? But they show the reader, the Wharton Admissions Committee, that you've done your due diligence and that you've drilled deep into the Wharton curriculum and you know exactly what specific classes. You don't want to name off core classes here. You want to name off classes that basically demonstrate how much you've researched. So it doesn't have to be the most exotic elective ever, but it has to be relevant, right? Anyway, you folks get it. So there has to be a one-to-one relationship here. I stated I need greater knowledge in technology. And so that's why in this paragraph, you would say, I need to take Professor Jones's technology management 605 course, whatever it may be. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. Furthermore, Wharton offers a personal leadership development. Okay, so before we get into this example right here, my fault here. When you write this, so I should have included perhaps a slightly different example here, but when you write this paragraph, you would say something like, so remember the prior paragraph sounds like this, right? So I must hit area 1, technology development, 2, operations, 3, management, right? And then in this paragraph, you would say something like, so through Wharton's comprehensive management major, I plan on taking Professor Smith's technology management 605 course, Professor Singh's global operations course, and Professor Kim's, covering the whole world here, management and entrepreneurial or management and finance organizations. Totally made those up. But you see how there's one-to-one here in this next paragraph, which I should probably include an example, which I did not. So that's what I mean here. So, and why is this so important? Because as simple as this may sound, as much as this may make sense to you right now, the problem is when people write essays, they'll start naming off all the usual suspects at Wharton, right? All the courses that sound cool, some global modular course, some whatever, but they don't necessarily relate to the area that the person must engage at Wharton in order to fill the gaps that they stated here. Right? These are gaps, 1, 2, 3. So give me relevant courses. Okay, I think I beat that horse to death. Anyway, all right. So then you would state the courses, and then the next paragraph. And again, I need to revise this slide, so forgive me. But the next paragraph, which is not here, or in the same paragraph, you would say, I need these 3 classes, which basically correspond to the 3 areas of development, right? And just name 3 electives. And then the latter half of that paragraph, what I would tell you to do is you would then say, here are the classes, they relate to my gaps that I told you about. Furthermore, Wharton offers me the opportunity, the hands-on, pragmatic, real-world learning experiences through GC, through not GCP, through the GMC's global modular courses, through leadership ventures, whatever course is out there that allows you to venture out into the field. I mean, this is like post-COVID, right? To apply what you've learned. So you state the specific gaps, you state the courses that'll address those gaps, and then you state additional in the field. I'll just use global modular courses where you travel and you actually engage different countries, cultures, peoples, projects, whatever, problems, and you get to test what you've learned in the classroom with immediacy, right? So it's like, here are the gaps, I get the classroom knowledge, then I'm going to be able to apply and test that classroom knowledge in the real world through, for an example, through my GMCs. All right. Then finally, you're going to get to the part where you start talking about developing as a leader. So think of the last paragraph I just spoke about as filling the management skills and gaps that you need, and then applying them and testing them. And then in this paragraph, this Why Wharton paragraph, a second Why Wharton paragraph, you would go through and you would talk about the personal leadership that you need to develop to run your own investment management firm or whatever it is you want to do. So this is kind of, remember in the very beginning of this presentation where I said I want to, through my Wharton MBA, I want to develop the management and leadership skills and network I require to reach my goals. So we already just told them, a few seconds back, we talked about the management acumen or skills that you need to learn. Then in this paragraph, we're going to talk about the leadership skills that you need to develop at Wharton. Holistic 360-degree leadership skills, right? And that's why you look forward to taking Wharton's Leading Effective Teams course or anything else like that, right? And you give them a little bit of, what that course is about. Of course, you don't want to spend too much time on the specifics of that course because they know what it is, but you still have to do a little of the, I want you to know I know what it is type thing, Anyway, so that's where you state this. Now, So again, this is a leadership development aspect of why Wharton. And then in the final paragraph here in our dummy essay here, if you have reached out to people at Wharton, and you should, again, view last week's presentation for more on how to do that or what you need to do to research the school. But if you have relationships at Wharton, if you visited the school, I know pre or post-COVID, visited the school online or in person, or you've interacted with the admissions committee, whatever, if you've engaged people at the school, then this is where you want to whip that out here at the end. And people will say to me, Paul, do I name drop? And the answer is, hell yes, you name drop. If you've spoken with specific people, I don't care if it's your brother, sister, your buddies from work, you need to reference those people here. Now, you don't have to go crazy and list off 2 people. 2 or 3 people is enough. 3 or 4 people is enough, right? But it's more important than just naming the people. You want to establish like how you know them beyond them being your sister or brother, right? So you can see that's what this paragraph here demonstrates. Now, why do we want to personalize this at the end? Okay, well, I mean, what is the importance of quote unquote name dropping? The importance of reaching out and doing this level of due diligence, turning over every rock, contacting people from Wharton clubs, reaching out to all your old coworkers that are there, even alumni, is to show your interest, right? Especially if you're a very competitive applicant who's going to be applying to Stanford and Harvard and any other top 3, 4, 5 business school. Wharton knows that. They can look at your resume and they're not dumb. This isn't their first rodeo. They know you're probably applying to, let's say, Harvard, right? So you want to really drive home the point here that you've done a personal level of outreach, and you have a more or less you've tried to cultivate a personal connection to the school because you're genuinely interested in the school and you're genuinely interested in attending, and you're qualified, and should Wharton accept you, that Wharton has a reasonable shot of landing you, right? You're not just throwing spaghetti against a wall. You're not just, asking every pretty guy or gal at the dance, out. So you have to show a genuine interest here, and a good way to do that is to talk about the outreach that you've had, and even the influence, these students have had on you already, right? Now, again, this is important. You want to leave them smiling. You want to make them think, oh, Joe or Josephine applicant here, we have a reasonable chance of landing them. Now, this is that point that I just made, right? Drive home you really want to attend, not by saying you really want to attend, but by demonstrating the level of outreach you've made to the Wharton community. That is much more important than some of the earlier paragraphs, remember, that we were talking about in this essay, because again, you only have 500 words. So remember the paragraph where your personal perspective that comes along with the long-term goals? If you don't remember that, go a few slides back. That's where you need to pare down that paragraph, as well as perhaps in the middle of the essay with the transition paragraphs, right? Because while you think those things are important to say, remember what's important to the reader. So perhaps the only reason you're restating a lot of what you've already done is because you're nervous and you really want to highlight your awesome experience. They get all that. Don't waste your time. This is a forward-looking essay. It's all about what you want to do in the future, how you're going to use or leverage or extract what you need from Wharton in the future. So anything that is about the past, including your personal upbringing or perspective in the long-term goal paragraph, including what you've done already at work in the middle transition paragraphs of this essay, that's old hat. That's old news. They don't need to see that as much as they need to know at the end that you know what you're talking about with Wharton because you've done the outreach and you really want to go. Okay. Have I beat that horse to death enough? Okay. See some nodding heads. All right. Let's move, into essay 2. Now look at this. I have current essay 2 at the top, and then I have old essay 2 right underneath that. Now, why would I do that? Why would Paul do that? Well, because I want to show you something here, without digressing too much. These questions are essentially the same in my humble opinion, right? Listen, not word for word, of course, but they are the same in the sense, in the sense of what Wharton is looking for, right? So I always say Wharton is a little bit of a yin yang, right? Hopefully I'm using this analogy appropriately, but the first essay that we just talked about is the one where you are selfish. What do I mean by that? It's the one where you say, these are my goals and this is why Wharton, and I'm going to take from your school and stuff all those relationships and information and leadership in my head. And I'm going to go off into the world and realize my goals, period. So you're selfish in a good way, appropriately selfish. Essay 2 is where you are a giver. So first essay, you're a taker. This essay, you are a giver, right? Yin yang, I think. Anyway, so getting back to the essay prompt here, taking into consideration your background, personal, professional, and or academic, I think that pretty much covers everything, doesn't it? How do you plan to make specific, meaningful contributions to the Wharton community? Community. So when you see that word community, right? Of course, that means students, alumni, faculty. Okay. Of course, that could mean inside the classroom when your butt is in the seat and the books are open and the professor is pontificating, right? But more than not, this will cover everything that goes on beyond the classroom, right? For the most part. I mean, there's always going to be some overlap between, the classroom obviously extends into the community, especially with some of the more experiential hands-on out in the field classes, right? But here I would draw a line in your head and say, okay, first off, at a high level, this essay is about what I bring to the table, what I'm planning on contributing to beyond the classroom, right? And this will also help solve another issue, which is oftentimes somebody will reference, a GMC, a global modular course in essay 1, and then they'll say, Paul, can I write about that same global modular course in essay 2 and what I bring to it? You could. You say, I need to take this global modular course because it's going to teach me 1, 2, 3. But then at the same time, you could bring 4, 5, 6 to it. And you're thinking, okay, I'll talk about that same course here. I'd say that's probably a poor tactic, right? You're not telling Wharton that as much as you really know about the school or as much as you really should know. I would say pick something else, right? Even if you can bring a lot to a certain course, maybe you could teach the darn thing. Pick another GMC, global modular course, right? But beyond that, I wouldn't even pick a GMC, right? Because that's still more or less a classroom experience, right? The way I would think about this essay to drive the point home is, roles and in what clubs could I get involved in and do well, right? My Wharton peers, classmates would elect me to lead this because I have prior experience in it. So start thinking like that. And I would think more of, I would think more of the professional club. So maybe you're a great volleyball player, basketball player, cricket, whatever. Those aren't going to be as relevant. So here you want to think, I want to maybe pick 3 things at Wharton that I can make a meaningful contribution to that lie beyond the traditional classroom environment. And this is, of course, based on my background, right? But think 3, because with only 400 words here, 3 is going to be your max, right? By the way, this essay, sometimes it's 500 words, sometimes it's 400. We'll see what happens with Wharton, right? Now, before we go any further, let's take a look at old essay 2, which I said, of course, was related to the current essay 2. So old essay 2. Describe an impactful experience or accomplishment that is not reflected elsewhere in your application. How will you use what you've learned through that experience to contribute to the Wharton community? Okay, so the current essay 2 is more of pick 3 things and talk about the 3 things you want to get involved in at Wharton, what you bring to it, how your past experiences will help build that or proliferate it or strengthen it or whatever at Wharton, right? The old essay 2 was more or less pick one thing from your background, one thing significant, and tell us about how it will. One thing that's significant that you that you will bring and will help contribute to the Wharton community. Now, here's the difficult, almost impossible conundrum that the old essay 2 presented, in my point of view, which was, if it's so impactful, certainly it would be reflected on your resume, even things that are personal, right? You're a member of a certain community, or you volunteer at some type of shelter. that is reflected a little bit in some of the organizations that you may have been involved in as an undergraduate or even to this very day, right? So does that, here's a rhetorical question. I mean, does that take, can I not talk about, I'm a member of a certain community, or, I volunteer at a certain shelter for abused dogs, because I was once an abused dog. I mean, can I not talk about that? So it presented, if it's so important, why isn't it on your application somewhere? Why aren't you involved in it in a way that can be on your resume? Or, when Wharton asks you to list your most important activities on the application form, why isn't it listed there? So therefore it excluded this. It was almost an impossible situation. It really made applicants pull their hair out, so to speak. Anyway, so that's why I believe they refined the question to the current essay 2, which is a much better version. But I think there's also something that we can take away from old essay 2, where they say, describe an impactful experience or accomplishment that is not reflected elsewhere in the application. I think that is a clue for this year. So remember when I was saying, hey, don't keep beating the same horse. So if you talked about something you need to engage at Wharton in essay 1, do you really need to talk about an essay 2? I would say don't repeat, don't rinse and repeat, right? Draw that line, as I said. But here, here, when they say in the current essay 2, how do you plan to make specific, meaningful contributions to the Wharton community? You can use the old essay 2 to interpret a little bit of what they kind of mean. How will you use what you've learned through a certain experience, probably a more personal experience, right? Something that isn't necessarily a headliner on your resume, to contribute to the Wharton community. So it's these things like this. Like, let's say you're the only female at work, for example, and you lead some, women's group, young professional females group leaders at your place of work, right? That is a perfect segue, or a perfect lead into something you would want to get involved in at Wharton, like Wharton Women in Business, right? So just start connecting the dots that way. It may be on your resume, that's fine. But just think, okay, what am I currently involved in that's leadership oriented? So I show that I'm passionate about it, but I'm in a role to have an impact. And then I can connect that to something that's going on at Wharton. Remember, keep it more business related. If you're a member of some type of affinity group outside of the office, that's totally cool too. So think of all things you're involved in that you're passionate about, but more that you have demonstrated leadership about. I know, and think of things that are more current than not. So you could go all the way back to undergrad, dramatic society, debate club, whatever it may be. And you can talk about, I don't know if there's some Wharton Follies or talent show, and maybe that's the third thing you talk about. But really, think of things like if you've led a boot camp at work, where you're in charge of training all the noobs, all the interns, all the new employees, and you've led a modeling boot camp, Excel modeling boot camp. You may want to talk about, and if it's relevant towards your future goals, you may want to talk about, as part of the data analytics club at Wharton. I think there is one. If not, you can start one. How you would want to run a boot camp called, Excel modeling, demystifying Excel modeling for people who don't know VLOOKUP, right? I joke, but the point is important here. You know something, you have an asset, and yes, it is work related. Okay, it's fine. But you see how you're picking a Wharton club and you're saying, I can do this role there. And maybe there is a boot camp. Okay, well then you can say that you want to lead that data modeling boot camp for the data club, right? You want to build a relationship with the, marketing club, who inevitably may have people who may need to shore up their, data analytics and modeling acumen or skills, right? So propose a partnership. If you did stuff like that, that's next level. This person knows Wharton. That's what the admissions committee is going to think, right? So don't be afraid to push it a little bit here within reason. Now make sure there's already not, a data modeling boot camp through the data modeling club that has a relationship with the marketing club. If there is, say you want to lead it. So you want to know, if they don't have it, propose it, right? Based on your background. And also it has to make sense. And this is why you want to review last week's presentation, where I talk about Wharton is moving in certain directions, and they're with under the old Dean Garrett, they pushed a lot of data modeling and this type of analytics. I mean, whatever. Just go back and watch that one. But here is where it starts to pay dividend in how you define what you can bring to the table as part of the Wharton community, right? So you can run a boot camp. If you're a part of a certain group, you can say you want to involve that. So if it's something personal, like I grew up in a poor tier 15 village in the Northwest, East, South part of South Asia, and I benefited from mentors. That is why I want to join, the Wharton Mentorship Club, and I want to work with local high school students that are female, that at top of their class demonstrate leadership, to cultivate those skills as part of the Mentorship Club or Wharton Women in Business, right? And if you define it that way, it also tells, and it's a sidebar, it also tells the admissions committee that, holy moly, this applicant, Joe or Josephine applicant, they really know about our West Philly community as well, right? So try to keep it, more on campus with the clubs and organizations there and centers and things like that. But just know invariably that these clubs will have outreach into the West Philly community, which has its socioeconomic issues, right? So if you can pay a little homage to that, that tells them, that's like next level, in my opinion. It's a small thing you can do to demonstrate next level knowledge of Wharton and what you're getting into, right? Anyway, so, all right. So I've covered, I've covered everything in this first slide ad nauseum. All right. So again, getting into the mechanics of essay 2. Looks like the presentation's running a little long, but that's okay. All right. So first paragraph. Again, always establish your essay thesis. This is what I want to tell you, right? So how do you plan on making specific, meaningful contributions to the Wharton community, right? So you want to say something to the effect of, and here I put the framework down. It's really kind of an example. Going through the experience, of being an investment banker, of being the first person in my family to ever attend university and get a job that was beyond, our village, right? It's always pushed me outside of my comfort zone. It's always made me appreciate where I've been and thus contribute to it, right? It's made me appreciate my opportunities. So in the beginning, you'd kind of say at a high level, in kind of a poetic way, you want to say, growing up this way, or working in this industry, or playing these roles, like everywhere that I've gone in my life because of who I am. And remember, this is more personal, I say, and what I've experienced growing up in a village somewhere. I've always benefited from mentors. I've always benefited from being intimately engaged with my communities and my coworkers and my colleagues and my classmates. And that's reflected in my history of leadership, and rest assured it will be reflected in my contributions at Wharton, right? That's kind of your opening paragraph, your opening thesis. So you're giving them a little bit, not too much, of the personal background or perspective or point of view. And you're saying, I have a history of contributing. Obviously, you can look at my resume. You don't have to tell them everything here because, again, it robs from what you really need to tell them later in the essay. But I have a history of contributing in and out of the office, in and out of the classroom, in and out of the village or community. Therefore, rest assured, have no doubt, I will continue to have that type of impact through my leadership and community involvement at Wharton. That's essentially your first paragraph thesis. There you go, folks. All right, I should probably put a link to my Patreon. All right, so that's pretty much what I'm trying to say here with the framework here, right? And what are some rules here beyond what I've told you already? Keep the first darn paragraph high level, very high level as I just stated. Don't worry about specifics. Listen, if you have a few extra words, and granted, this is only a 400-word essay, comes quickly, then you can go back and maybe add a little bit, but I would say why? Why Joe applicant? Why Josephine applicant? Why not add more detail into the meat of the essay, the details? So anyway, just know that you want your opening paragraph to be clear. You want it to allude to your history, of involvement, of community involvement and commitment and leadership. You don't need to name off those experiences because they can clearly see it through your resume. If it's not on your resume, you need to make your resume more clear, right? You need to make your answers on the online application for Wharton more clear as to what your roles were in various organizations. They get it. Again, not Wharton Admissions Committee's first rodeo. Keep it high level. Okay. Anyway. All right. So Now, what you're going to want to do, and again, I know I told you before that you don't want to necessarily use classroom examples, so kick me in the face here, but I use a classroom example. Anyway, but just don't let that distract you here. The point is you want to be able to relate something from your background to something going on in the Wharton community, which of course I told you is outside of the classroom, but here I use inside the classroom. All right, so start proving. So once you say you have a history of involvement, now you have to name, I would say in a 400-word essay, 3 examples of what you bring. And I know I already told you a few, so I'm kind of maybe beating a dead horse a little bit here, but to show you specifics, like during classroom discussions in New Product Development 101 and another related class, I plan to discuss my work alongside the company's CEO in India as we implemented a first of its kind service product technology, whatever, in the local market area, region, country. Boy, how do you like those brackets? Okay. Not only did I have to manage through limitations, obstacles associated with resources, funding, teammates, but also nuances of a different language and working culture, right? So therefore, why are we telling this to the admissions committee? Because they're during technology, entrepreneurship, so you see there's a yin yang here, right? It's like new product development, and you want to go back to last week's presentation, you want to research that class, you want to read the syllabus, and you know what's going on in that class. The admissions committee knows what's going on in that class. You could maybe tell them a little bit more what's going on in that class, but you don't really need to if you write this correctly, because if you are saying, I implemented a first of its kind product service in this emerging area or market, and I managed through these limitations of, no internet, no electricity, no water, whatever, you're essentially telling them what the class is about, because you're picking things that class discusses. So you don't have to say, what else would you say in this paragraph? And, these are classes that discuss, limited funding, resources, teammates in an emerging market area, country, region. So you don't need to state that last part because, you're matching it already by virtue of what you're electing to write in these sentences about these 2 example classes, right? So this is a very, succinct, brief, clear, connecting one-to-one. Here's the class. See how it's clear? Here is the class or club or center or initiative at Wharton I plan on getting involved in. Here is what I bring to that. Now, this is distinctly different than essay 1. So some folks here on this presentation may think, oh, well, this could be a good paragraph for essay 1 then, because it talks about classes. No, because remember, essay 1, you're being selfish. You need to define what it is you need to learn from a specific class, because you told Wharton in one of the paragraphs that you have 3 or 4 gap areas that you need to fill. And that's what this is. So you can't talk about what you bring to these classes. Listen, you could talk about what you learn and what you need to learn and what you could bring to a certain class, but you'll find yourself quickly running out of room. So again, draw that line in your mind. First essay, you're being selfish. This is what I need to suck out of your school and into my brain. And this essay is, what do I bring? Okay, here's another example, classroom. I know, kick me in the face. During Technology Entrepreneurship 303, I will share how I led the subsequent spinoff of the service into its own tech company, yada, yada, yada. Finally, in Sources and Uses of Capital in the Middle East, North Africa, 404, and negotiations, I plan to discuss how I facilitated the acquisition of a specific type of technology, working with both my CEO and investees. So you see how simple it can be? You can actually nail a bunch of things that you want to contribute to in this essay in 1 or 2 sentences, and then move on to the next one. Now, be careful that you don't have it be a laundry list. I always say 3. Using this approach, you could probably get 6 things into this essay, right? But when you have to pick between being more specific about fewer things versus being more general about a lot of different things, always err on the side of being more specific about fewer things. You want to dive deeper into a few things to demonstrate your knowledge, as opposed to being too general. Lends itself well to laundry listing, which is, you're just going through anything and everything that has technology or entrepreneurship in its title or in its club name. And that's when it's like, okay, this essay sounds like everyone else's, and it's not really digging deep enough to differentiate Joe applicant or Josephine applicant. Makes sense? Cool. All right, so again, I'm not going to read through all of this, right? But here is, here's basically where you keep diving into other aspects of the, what you can bring to the Wharton community. It's pretty much rinse and repeat. You find something, you can bring something to. Again, don't pick classes. I know. Based off of your history at work or personal, find the club that you want to be involved in, read everything about that club, read everything about the different roles in that club. What role do you want to serve? You don't have to be president of everything. My God. What about being the VP of events or outreach? So if, as an undergraduate, if you were in the alumni cell or alumni outreach club or some function like that, right? Well, then why can't you be, a head of outreach or VP of outreach for Wharton Women in Business, right? Or whatever other club that's relevant to your background. So start thinking about those connections, right? Draw them out on a piece of paper if you have to and connect the dots. All right, so what else? And again, I'm just giving more examples here. Again, they're, I apologize that they're all classroom, but hopefully you get the main point without me reading about it, right? And again, the more examples you can use that have depth, and you're probably gonna get to 3, maybe 4, then you're done, right? Usually I found 3 or 4, again, is where it's sufficient enough to have the necessary depth to show the admissions committee you know what you're talking about, while having a sufficient number of examples to show that you're actually relevant and that you have an idea of how you can contribute while part of the Wharton community. Anyway, so here's an example on page 16 about building up an entirely new organization at work, or maybe even as an undergrad, maybe even some volunteer initiative outside of what you normally do at work. Remember, think in terms of the leadership things that you've led and developed, and then go look and find those clubs. So let's say you mentor, you volunteer to teach people interviewing skills. People recently released from prison, I don't know, Streetwise Partners, something like that. There will be, Streetwise Partners might have an existing relationship with Wharton. Why can't you own and lead that, right? If they don't, why can't you use the, community outreach club or net impact to build that relationship, especially if you are doing or fulfilling some type of significant role at a nonprofit organization like Streetwise Partners, right? So you start thinking in that, right? Now, again, you want to keep things more businessy than not. Okay, fine. But start with what you're leading now and what you have led in the past, but hopefully now more current, in or out of the office. Then find out what clubs that connects to, read everything about the different roles of the clubs. You can even contact some of the people that fulfill those roles today, talk to them over Skype, Zoom, whatever people use, or email. And again, from last week's presentation, if you find out who these people are in Wharton Women in Business, let's say, as an example, go look on LinkedIn, see what other clubs are involved in, see what their background is, see what roles they're playing in Wharton Women in Business, if they listed on LinkedIn, but also look at, what else they've been up to there. And maybe you can kind of use that a little bit as a blueprint for what you can say. Anyway, all right. Okay, I include slide number 17 because this essay and every essay you may write for Wharton, you may want to have a nice little closing paragraph. So in summary, in conclusion, I really want to go to your school. I'm going to be a full contributor. It's almost like you're summarizing what the points you maybe should have made in the first paragraph. But if you're not introducing new information in the final paragraph that's relevant to supporting your main thesis that you're a contributor, so if you're not introducing a new example, for the love of God, do not summarize the paragraphs above, any of them, right? All that tells the reader, and I mean this 1000%, is that you lack confidence, right? So you think you have to have a nice little handshake or kiss the baby on the way out and all that stuff. No, you don't. When you're done saying what you need to say, when you're done with your last example that's relevant, that tells them something new about what you want to get involved in this essay, for example, look for the exit and leave. Don't, if you find yourself wanting to write a concluding paragraph that starts off with "in conclusion" or "to summarize" or "to sum up," then you're wasting valuable words. That's not telling them anything new or what they need to know, right? And you're also signaling your lack of confidence in what you're saying. Why else would you have to slather on another coat of, paint to get the thing to sell? So don't do that. Totally waste. And it may seem abrupt to you, only because you're a new essay writer, right? It's not. Again, consider the perspective of the Wharton Admissions Committee person who's reading this 2 a.m, underpaid, tired, pissed off, probably read 5 or 6 bad essays in a row. They get to yours, right? If you are efficient, if you are clear, if you cut the BS and you cut all the cruft or crap or unnecessary writing at the end, or hell, throughout the whole essay, it's definitely a breath of fresh air. But that is the type of thing that will begin to start differentiating you. I can't turn a 650 into a 750 GMAT score, but they'll appreciate it, right? And that's in the end, you need them to like you, right? It's not all numbers. All right. Optional essay. You thought we were done, but wait, there's more. Okay, so optional essay, inevitably people will want to write this. I mean, this builds off of my last point. Listen, the guidance. So here's the optional essay prompt from Wharton. They give guidance that I put in quotes here. This space can be used to address blah, 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 right? You see how they're not saying, hey, dude, cut and paste a personal statement that your essay from Harvard in here, or whatever other school. Don't do that, right? This essay is very to the point. It's very brass tacks, meaning don't bullshit here, for lack of a better word. Excuse my French. Get to the point. Tell them, I want to tell you about my low GPA during undergrad. I want to tell you about this or that or whatever it may be, right? And until they have no idea what you're going to talk about here. So if all of a sudden you start talking about like, oh, I grew up in a village where, nobody ever leaves and everybody's miserable. And they're like, what? The first thing they're going to think is, oh, okay, I guess this person wants to cut and paste, but I have no idea how or why this is relevant. And I'm betting they're going to make me read all the way to the end to find out why I'm reading this. That is not a good thing for the person who is reading your essay to think. Do not make them do any more work than they have to. So anyway, optional essay, again, is there to explain what you need to, right? Gaps in employment, okay, even criminal records. And Wharton will background check, by the way. They actually do. A lot of these schools say they background check. I highly doubt that based off of anecdotal experience. But they will check. So if you say you started something or own something or whatever, they will ask for the articles of incorporation if you started a business. Anyway, okay, so again, I list here, it's for informing, not entertaining. But okay, so this is not another platform. I should probably highlight this. This is not another platform for you to highlight something positive or necessarily negative, right? You just want to explain bad performance, fine. And that's it, right? Or why you changed schools or why you currently don't have a job. When I say negative, it's not a platform to make excuses for something. Okay, keep it brief. Because there is no excuse that the reader hasn't heard, right? All you do is you end your application, because it's probably one of the last things they're going to read. It's the last essay they're going to read. They'll go over your information sheet, your resume, probably your recommendations, and then your essays, or essays and recommendations, right? But if this is one of the last things they read, is why end it on a low note, right? Some things you may have to explain: why you dropped out of, why you attended 5 colleges, why you dropped out of school, why you got an F in thermodynamics 1, 2, and 3. But don't bring something up that doesn't need to be explained and that basically shows your hand, which is your lack of confidence in something. Okay. Listen, if you have specific questions, you can email me about what to include and what not to include. I've seen it all. If it is something positive, by the way, so the last slide, something negative, this is something positive. The reader may wonder why you didn't. So if you want to talk about, your lifelong commitment to, the fuzzy pet shelter, right, that you volunteer for every weekend, and how it's so important to you, and how you'd like to bring a fuzzy pet center to every next to every 7-Eleven on every street corner. If it's that important to you, you just want to brag about it, or you finished first on some test out of 300,000 test takers, first of all, it's not relevant. But if it is something that may be relevant, why isn't it included somewhere else in the essay, particularly essay 2, right? They're giving you this opportunity to tell them something from your background you bring to the table. So too little, too late here, right? And again, don't cut and paste a personal statement. I mean, that's so transparent. if I was an admissions committee reader for Wharton, I'd be frankly insulted. It tells them you don't really want to go there. Yeah, you spend a lot of time writing it. Yeah, you think it's great. Yeah, your mom said it was cool, but it's completely inappropriate. All right. That's, again, a little note here about any classes and things that you plan on taking. Yeah, again, for informing. All right, folks, that's it for today. Sorry we ran over a little bit, but I'm not taking any complaints. If you have any questions, if you want the slides, email me. I owe a ton of people slides. There was something like 50 people, 60 people who emailed me for slides last week. So I'm going through that list and banging it out. But email me again. If you didn't make last week's presentation, tell me you need slides from the first session and the second session, and I'll email them to you. Anyway, I think we probably have some comments or questions. All right, here we go. Let's see. Ram at 9:32 a.m. said, explore the network and extract out the business or prepare the pitch for investment. Short-term goals for entrepreneur profile. Any opinion on goals related to entrepreneur profile? Again, I'd have to see your resume. I think I understand your question. It's like, if you're an entrepreneur now, what do you want to do? What I've seen for people who have started their own company or work for a startup is that they'll say they lack sufficient product management knowledge. They want to go work for a world leader in the development of products and services, tech products and services. Therefore, I would like to go, so if you work at, a few years back, I worked with people from Urban Clap in India, now called Urban, because Urban Clap doesn't translate well in some cultures, but now called Urban. But, they were talking about getting, working for an entrepreneur organization, leading projects and things of, building businesses. A lot of time it's very on the job training, right? OTJ, learn as you go. Not a lot of formalized learning, let's say, not a lot of hand holding. But if you've done it well at an entrepreneurial company or your own company, you can say the reason I want to go to business school is because I want to learn. Yeah, you do have a lot of the raw skills and characteristics, but you want to learn how a world leader does it. You want to learn how a world leader takes some fledgling nascent product and brings it and translates it to every corner of the globe, right? So I imagine as an entrepreneur, you're probably selling a product or a service, right? So that's what I tend to see for people who are more related to the entrepreneurial profile. Okay, Mr. Singh at 9:33. Can joining politics back in my home country when I am in my late 40s be short enough long-term goal? Can joining? Oh, okay. So let me guess. Mr. Singh here at 9:33 a.m. So what I think he's saying, or what you're saying, I'll reframe the question, is that, now you're working for an educational nonprofit, you're working for the Gates Foundation in India or somewhere, right? And short-term goal, you're going to rejoin the organization. Long-term goal, can I say I want to head a ministry, the educational ministry in India, for example, not making any assumptions about your name, and say I want to do that. And the answer is, yeah, you can. Remember, long-term goal should be a bit aspirational, should reflect your personal, needs and wants. And if it builds off of your short-term goal, and if it's going to leverage a lot of your, everything that you've gained through your short-term goal, then yeah, you can. By the way, folks, if there's background noise, excuse me. All right, so that's what I would say. You don't have to define your late 40s or anything like that in your short-term goal, by the way. Just say short-term, it's this. Long-term, obviously building upon short-term. I want to go and revolutionize education in India as the ministry. It can be the head of some strategic consulting wing of the Indian government. It can be head of the Ministry of Education, whatever, right? But yeah, you can say that. Again, the long-term goal for a school like Wharton is not nearly as critical as defining your short-term goal. By the way, you can also define a backup goal. International applicants, this may be advisable, but if your short-term goal is to go work for a Dahlberg or Bridgespan as a consultant, perhaps a backup goal would be to join, you would basically serve the same role at like a Byju's or a Protham, right? Type thing, right? But just make sure it's a little bit more conservative, let's say, or not anywhere, not in the very least, not more aggressive than your short-term goal. So in the short term, I want to join Dalbert Bridgeband. I want to work in their educational or healthcare, whatever projects, or maybe all of them. As a backup plan, I could always return to my current employer. So let's say you're at Protham or a Byju's or whatever. I could accept the open offer I had to return to Byju's, where I would, assume a manager role and lead XYZ, right? I think, listen, that can be important for if you're an international applicant, whatever. All right, so, and if you have an existing offer to return to BCG or Bain or McKinsey, wherever, say it as a backup goal, right? Or even as your primary short-term goal. Okay, anyway. Okay, Ram at 9:45, grow the existing business through network management skills and wire a ton learning after the MBA. Can I consider it long-term goals or why MBA? Well, that's not your goal. That's why you need an MBA. So you're not just growing your existing business through network. Yeah, okay. Growing your existing business, that can be, listen, they're not a lot of, at a school like Wharton, you have to look to see who is there. How many, go to LinkedIn. How many entrepreneurs do you see? Try to find some. I'm not saying that there aren't, but try to see and go back and see who ran their own business beforehand or worked for a very small company beforehand. What did they do afterwards? Remember, these schools are pumping out like finance people, consultants, product managers, and then, a whole bunch of a few other things, right? So if, I mean, how many people there are stating that they want to grow their business immediately upon graduation? Now, I know you said this is your long-term goal, but they're going to think, okay, so Ram is he has a business, he's going to go get the Wharton MBA, then he's going to go work for, some tech company as a product manager developing a product. And then somehow he's going to pick right back up with his existing business 15 years down the road. I think, what the hell happened with the business in the meantime, right? Remember that? You got to pull that off and dust it. But no, so I don't think you have to say it would be a new, your existing business. It can be a new business, right? It can be starting another business and growing that new business may be related to maybe your existing business, but it really should be predicated or reliant or rest upon your whatever you do in the short term goal. So yeah, it would be a little strange if all of a sudden 15 years later, you're like, oh, right back where I started from, going to grow this thing now, giddy up. So it would be your long-term goal and not necessarily YMBA. I mean, you're kind of combining things. Long-term goal would be grow existing business. Why MBA is because you need the network and management skills. Okay, Perva, 9:46 a.m. For someone who is looking for a switch with MBA, how to bridge the work experience with the future goals. Okay, so that your middle paragraphs, the transition paragraphs, would be a little thicker or a little more lengthy than the average bear, right? So you would have to say, at my current place of work, I've developed skill A, B, C, and D, all of which are relevant to a future in whatever future industry you want to do, right? And then you would say, something like, but for as much as I have learned and gained, that's transferable to my future role in the new industry, I still have to learn greater management leadership knowledge in area 1, 2, or 3, right? So that's how you would handle that. Now I gave you an abbreviated version, but essentially that's it. Okay, Mr. Chowdhury, 9:54 a.m. Would you mention the companies you want to join? Yeah, I would. Now, well, it depends, right? Like everything. But this is why you have to go view last week's presentation, because you want to go look on LinkedIn and you want to make sure those companies actually recruit at Wharton. Don't be short-sighted or don't be ill-advised by saying, I want to join this tech company. And if that company's never ever hired anybody from Wharton, nobody from Wharton works there, nobody from Wharton started it. I'm talking about Wharton MBA, not Wharton undergrad. Then do not name that company. It tells them you're honestly, without sounding like a jerk, it tells them you're clueless, right? Anyway, so Mr. Chowdhury says, I'm an airline pilot wishing to switch to an airline finance role focused on joining Wharton. Cool, you're in the right presentation. But none of the American airlines have a base in Philadelphia. How does that affect my application? Okay, so Wharton is a global program, right? Wharton has enough clout or reach where if you had to go join United Airlines in Chicago, I think, in Delta in Atlanta, you're going to be fine, right? But what I would say is, does it have to be an airline, right? What if you want to go join Boeing or Airbus, right? Can it be a manufacturer? I know it's like, I know your airline pilot expertise could be relevant to, understanding how the business runs and the pilot's perspective and an operations perspective, let's say. But it doesn't necessarily have to be an airline out of Philadelphia. Now you're getting a little too granular. Listen, it can be American Airlines to United to Delta to whatever, right? To JetBlue. But what's most important here, Mr. Chowdhury, is you know that company has hired before from Wharton. So forget about Philly and go look on LinkedIn and find out who from Wharton did an internship or was hired right out of Wharton or joined. There's a critical mass of Wharton grads that work at, United in Chicago. Okay, then there you go. Boom. And I would actually reach out to those people, especially if they have a pilot's license that are working at these, to see. I would even Google and look on Wharton's website to see, is there a profile of any students who have pilot's licenses? What are they doing? Obviously, just because you have a pilot's license doesn't mean you're a commercial pilot, doesn't mean you want to join American or United or Delta. Maybe they're flying Cessnas, but just reach out to them and see what's up, right? You'd definitely be an asset. I mean, that's pretty cool. I'm sure there's a story there, Mr. Chowdhury. All right, so, okay, Chowdhury, opinions on goals related to the finance industry for a non-finance professional. Oh, geez. I mean, any way you look at it here, you're going to be considered a career switcher. So you just kind of have to accept it. Again, you really do have to show why. Like for you, I would ask you, does it have to be finance? I know Wharton is the finance school, but Wharton is also the operations school. Wharton is so diverse in terms of its majors and its breadth of electives. It's pretty much anything you want it to be school, to be honest with you. So why does it have to be finance? I'm not telling you to make up goals or whatever, but you got to think about what makes the most sense. Pilots will know the bloody guts of the airline industry. So why wouldn't it be related to finance? Could be a part of it, but what about operations and helping an airline, even as a consultant for McKinsey or whoever? I mean, help airlines make better decisions, right? I mean, who better than you? You get a Wharton MBA, you get a lot of experience in operations and data-driven decisions and analysis and risk management, and okay, yeah, a little bit of finance, sure. Who would be better than you, Mr. Chowdhury, than to go work for an American United Delta, right? So don't be so fixated on finance, because listen, you got to go to war with what you have and leverage that fully. Yes, maybe you're trying to play to the audience here at Wharton by saying, finance, finance, finance. But if that doesn't leverage as much as you needed to from your background, then you're going to show up as weak, because remember, you're competing against other people who may have finance experience, right? Maybe they're not pilots, but think about it from a recruiter's perspective. The recruiter needs somebody with hardcore modeling skills and prior corporate finance experience, as opposed to somebody who's an airline pilot. Let's be realistic here. So, but if I was a recruiter and I was recruiting for a job at American or United or Delta, and I saw somebody with a pilot's, license and commercial flying experience who had a bunch of operations experience because of their, because they were a pilot, but specialized in that type of major or focused on that specialization at Wharton, and knew how these, dinosaur airline operators can make better decisions, I'd marry that man in a heartbeat, right? I'd hire that guy. But I'm, not a recruiter anyway. But try to more fully leverage what you have. I would encourage you to go more. You can take finance classes. You will take finance classes, but definitely more of an operations role. And also try to see, so Mr. Chowdhury, try to see if these airlines have leadership development programs or leadership rotation programs. I bet you they do, right? That hire MBAs, of course. Try to see which ones have. And don't worry about the location, right? Obviously, you want it to probably be in the United States. Anyway, okay. Mr. Gokari, I have a master's degree in management. I know about the PGDM, right? I actually just was interviewed by Forbes magazine about getting a second MBA from a top institute in India. Any tips how to handle this on the application? Well, without going into a completely separate presentation, you want to make sure that the school you are applying to, let's say Wharton, will actually accept somebody with a prior MBA. I know it's a PGDM, but a lot of schools in the States, like Haas, consider it to be a first MBA, and they won't accept it. Most of the time, it's dealt with on a one-on-one basis. I forgot here if Wharton will accept it or not. I think they will, to be honest with you, but don't quote me on that. But go check. You would check the online page. If you can't get an answer there, go and email the admissions committee. And folks, on this presentation, do not be afraid to email the admissions committee. They're not going to put you in a little black book full of people to automatically deny once you submit your application. Just reach out and email. You can save so much time, anxiety, ambiguity by reaching out and getting them to answer a question like this, right? Because what you don't want, Mr. Gokari, is to submit your application and then holy moly, you find out that they actually don't accept first MBAs. You just wasted $250 and a lot of time on your app. Okay. Smart Home says, you mentioned writing, I am the first person to be educated in my family. This can be a success story. Did I say that? However, if I'm from a highly successful family, is that seen positively by admins or a brag? Well, it depends if it's relevant in the essay, right? So, if you're the first, I mean, listen, most people, so the reason why a person would state they're the first in their family is because it's relevant, obviously, to something in their essay. And usually you're trying to make the case that something was so personally meaningful to you because it was difficult, because it presented challenges. It was a cauldron. It was a test of your character that you survived and overcame, that it makes something very personal to you. And that's why you want to bring running water to every village in Canada, right? If you say, if it's not that, so that's the reason why it's worth mentioning in the example being the first in a family to go to school. So, if you come from a very wealthy family and God bless you, I mean, that's pretty awesome. But you would only mention something like that if it's relevant. So let's say your mom or your father or your family or whoever expects you to assume the reins of a family company, let's say, in the long term, then you wouldn't mention that the family is very successful and we're rich. What you're saying is that your short-term goal is to go get to go get management experience at McKinsey, work across all cultures and see the best practices and yada. Okay. And then in the long term, I will assume the reins of the family company, a position my mom now holds or dad now holds or whatever, right? And I'm going to bring this company, we make whatever, some consumer product. I'm going to bring it into the new age, right? Bring it all online. Listen, that they get it. I mean, so can you brag about it? No, you wouldn't brag also about coming from, some remote village in the middle of nowhere, right? You're stating facts that are relevant to support something is relevant to you, whether it is the foundation of your conviction or whether it's part of the whole plan, and that's it, right? So usually details like that, I come from a very successful family. I had a lot of resources and access even from a little kid, the age I was a little whatever, a wee lad, or you would show how, like in a story for Harvard or Stanford, you would show how that created a once upon a time and everyday situation without getting into this. I have another Harvard presentation online on YouTube I think it's in GMAT Club, and it talks about how to create a story for Harvard and things like that. But it'd be more relevant for that, right? Anyway, hopefully I kind of halfway answered it, right? So nothing is, don't think of it in terms of a brag or not, or a heartstrings story or not. Think about it as relevant or not. And again, people do make the mistake of talking too much about, woe is me, I had to overcome, all these obstacles. I was the first person to ever do this in my village, and had to walk, uphill and downhill to school in 5 feet of snow. Like, they get it. So just keep that type of personal, borderline emotional story to a minimum, because what they really care about is how it affected you and your perspective. Okay. Mr. Chowdhury says, thanks a lot, Paul. Would love to connect you in person. This was this was quite an interesting. Okay, hey man, that's what I'm here for. Hi, ad administrator. I think that's me. So Mr. Kulkarni at 10:33 a.m. says, hi, ad administrator. What are my chances? I'm a mechanical engineer with 42 months of experience, out of which 30 months international in oil and gas with GMAT score 770, good volunteer work. Okay, what are my chances? I mean, I don't know if I can answer that question necessarily because I don't know your goals, but this is what I would say. Your chances can be good. Why? So what I've seen with engineers from oil and gas, and I've worked with quite a few of them, nice GMAT score, by the way, is that you want to say something like, I want to go to your MBA program because I see the future of the industry and where it's headed. I want to get into more of the sustainability aspect, more of the renewables, the clean tech, that type of thing, right? And I have a lot of industry knowledge, right, of within energy. We'll call it, you say oil and gas, let's call it energy, right? And I want to go from the dinosaur ways of energy and working at Exxon Mobil, Shell, BP, Schlumberger, and I want to get into more of this. So I want to take what I know, all the project management, all of the infrastructure, delivery, upstream, downstream, take all of that knowledge, and I want to go and learn more about, the technology strategies, the companies, whatever, the industry, the clean energy industry, all these aspects. And you would have to go, like, you would look at a school like LBS. I had a client who's now at LBS, who worked for a major energy company, and it was all oil and gas, right? Tar pits type thing. And so that was his case that he made at LBS, and he's loving it, right? So you would, oil and gas, like Duke, I know has, whatever, they're known for kind of being a energy oriented or related MBA, perhaps more in the finance direction or whatever. But start looking around and seeing, do I see a critical mass of classes, courses, clubs related to energy, clean tech, sustainability, yada yada, right? Also, you want to go and look on LinkedIn, last week's presentation, hello, and see, guys or gals with MBAs from Wharton or Duke or wherever, top MBA programs in the US, that went and worked in the energy industry upon graduation. Who and where are they working? What is their title? Their pre-MBA experience before Wharton. Did it look like mine? Or can it approximate mine? Whatever. But just more importantly, number one, what are they doing afterwards, for God's sake? If you see that, some company that maybe you've never heard of has hired a few MBAs, to work on their clean technology initiatives, okay, dude, there's your answer. There's your blueprint right there. Of course, you could always go. I've had other applicants who have gotten into top MBA programs say, they want to go back and continue working for Shell, for example, but they want to go work specifically in like this clean tech, clean energy, this emerging group within the company that's focused on these types of, again, clean tech sustainability initiatives. It's like a internal strategy group, things like that, right? Anyway, so that's, there you go, Mr. Carney at 10:33 a.m. All right, Smart Home at 10:35 a.m. says, if I'm currently enrolled in a part-time remote specialized aerospace MBA, and I plan to apply to a Wharton MBA, for example, is it better to mention or ignore the part-time MBA? Oh, okay. So let's straight talk here. Okay, first off, you should always disclose the truth, right? I mean, okay, maybe that's a no shit statement. Like, I'm not going to tell you that you should hide it. That's for sure. But here's the thing, man. Like, let's just have a like more an adult conversation here, where it's, why are you in that part-time specialized aerospace MBA? I mean, what is an aerospace MBA? I mean, all the case studies are related to Boeing and Airbus and Raytheon or whoever else, is in the industry, SpaceX. So what I would say is this: quit. Listen, if I was in your situation, knowing what I know about you, which isn't very much, smart home, I would quit that MBA. Maybe work's paying for it, great. But what you don't want is like to complete it, and then Wharton will find out maybe about it, right? But you don't ever want to be in a position where you're your first year, second year Wharton, and then all of a sudden it comes out like, yeah, dude, I have a prayer, and there's a lot of potential liability here. But if you went and you're taking this, and I would just quit and not complete it and apply to Wharton, and then maybe you wouldn't have to disclose it. To be honest with you, but if you did this, it might be valuable to disclose it in the sense that you could say, why Wharton MBA, or in an optional essay, you could say, I was enrolled in a part-time MBA, completed half my classes, whatever, and I realized, I just wanted to disclose it because I want to be completely transparent with you, Wharton Admissions Committee, which is a good thing to say, because if it's something you didn't have to disclose, that they would have never maybe found out about, and I don't think they'd probably ever find out about this, and you voluntarily disclosed it, you look like a hero, right? You look like a completely credible, honest person, which you are, right? So you would disclose it and you'd say, so, and I just wanted to get that out there. In no way does this online aerospace MBA experience compare with a in-classroom, the caliber of an in-classroom experience, such as your illustrious Wharton MBA program, right? I was missing the networking element. I was missing the interaction in that in-class, face-to-face, hands-on, roll up the sleeves element. I was missing certainly the leadership development aspect in that MBA curriculum. So if I were you, I would just think about pulling the plug on the part-time program or the part-time aerospace MBA, and that's it. It sounds like the aerospace MBA sounds like something maybe work, maybe paying for, or maybe you have money to burn. But I just don't see, like, realistically, real talk here. What are you getting out of that MBA? Yeah, I mean, those are almost like warm-up classes for what you would experience at Wharton. Like, why would you even apply to Wharton? So maybe some of the classes are the same, right? But you're applying to Wharton because you're getting a prolific network of people who can provide you even greater access than you may have now to opportunities, right? To build your own business, to do whatever. And that's not something you're going to get online, right? So listen, if you're taking accounting, finance, the aerospace flavor of it, whatever that may be, dude, I would can it, chalk it up, lesson learned. You probably learned a lot in terms of covering your basic finance or your basic core courses, and then move on. Listen, don't throw good money after bad, but don't put yourself, so smart home, don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to have to explain that stuff and look and actually have a degree, a first MBA. If they run a background check, they like Wharton does background check out of all the schools. I shit you not. Out of all the top MBA schools, the Wharton one is the most rigorous. If they catch that, dude, don't make a mistake that you don't need to make, right? So just listen. I don't know all the background. Those are just my initial thoughts. So, James K., how can we use the Lauder essay as well? Should we leave out some info from the main essay? No, I would not. So, the Lauder program, dual degree MBA, right? So, whatever, like that, I wouldn't, right? Because you can't assume. And again, I'd have to look more into this, by the way. If you're applying to the Lauder program as well, I would have to look to see what specific question they're asking you. So if you know right away, post it here in the chat. But so James, you don't assume, like, listen, you don't want to, that, for example, the Wharton Admissions Committee is going to view Essay 1 and Essay 2, right? But you can't necessarily assume, and this goes for Wharton or other schools, that the same admissions people will be reviewing the Lauder essay. It could go to a separate committee, separate department, separate building, whatever. And so if you're assuming that they may know what your goals are, Lauder may not, right? But don't slow roll, as they say, on one essay because you want to save that content for another. I would include it, and then for Lauder, be smart about it, be efficient about it, but you would, if they're asking about goals, include the goals, right? Don't just say CSA 1 or CSA 2. Put it in there. So yeah, what you will get is the same as Wharton, but for Lauder. Okay, what you will. Okay, so here what I would. Okay, so I would need examples of. I would need actually to see the essay, like your draft, to see what you are planning on including or not including. But I would make. So if essay 2 is i.e. what you will gain and what you will consider. So if it's the same exact essays as the regular full-time program, you orient the specific classes and clubs and things more towards the Lauder, that part of the curriculum, the Lauder part of the curriculum. So yeah, you need 3 general areas, and you could probably state, stuff from the general Wharton curriculum, but then you would probably have another even paragraph in there where you would say, I'm applying to Wharton because I need to cover these bases in area 1, 2, 3. But and you state it, and you'd say, but I am specifically applying to the Lauder, program, because it offers additional coursework that I need to plug a gap, a 4th or 5th gap that I listed in an earlier paragraph in the essay through this and this, right? And really, you'd be looking to see what are the reasons Lauder states as to why somebody would join this flavor of the MBA, right? What are you supposed to get out of it? I'm asking rhetorically, but and then you would feed that back to them. So if they say, you're going to gain international experience and yada yada that of this special cohort that speaks 1,700 different languages, and okay, then it's part of your gaps. Remember, it's like I need product management experience, technology strategy expertise, and greater general management expertise, plus an international network and knowledge of 1,700 different languages. So the first 3 would be covered by Wharton, and the last thing where you say, I'm applying to Lauder because additionally it offers all this stuff, those 3 things, plus those 3 things that plug gaps, plus this extra, cherry on top stuff that will address that 4th critical gap that I have. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, this is where it gets tough because you have to cut down. You still have only 500 words, I'm assuming, right? Same word limits. So you'd have to cut down on some of the other stuff that you would say, and you would have to go on and really concentrate on why the specific part of Lauder. So the essay would probably pretty much flow the same: long-term goal, short-term goal, a little bit of like what you need to learn, and then you start getting into why Wharton. Here are the classes, and then when you start getting into the part probably where you talk about, okay, here are the classes that address the gaps, and then next comes the pragmatic hands-on learning opportunities that will allow me to apply what I've learned internationally out in the field. That's where you would really start emphasizing the Lauder stuff, in my opinion, just thinking about it right now. You would go and, say, additionally through the Lauder Institute, I'll have an opportunity to take what I've learned in Wharton through my classes at Lauder, taking them and doing this Lauder specific in the field, hands-on, rolling up the sleeves, going to developing country experience where I'm going to team up with yada, yada, yada. And this will allow me to apply what I've learned in the real world, go back to the drawing board if I have to, form relation, so things like that, right? So James at 10:46, hopefully that'll help. Hey, James K, 10:49, 100% Paul, thanks, man. So folks, again, email me, I'll send you the slides. If I haven't sent you the slides from when you emailed me from the last time, I'm getting through it. There's a ton of people who emailed me. I'm going to send both this presentation and last week's. All right, folks, have a good day, and thanks for joining. See you next week for session 3 of writing awesome, fun, super terrific Wharton essays.